The Sacred Magic of Abramelin the Mage. Book 3. Book the Holy Magic, which God gave unto Moses, Aaron, David, Solomon, and other saints, patriarchs and prophets, which teacheth the true divine wisdom, bequeathed by Abraham unto Lamech his son, translated from the Hebrew. The third book of the Sacred Magic. The Prologue. He who shall have faithfully observed that which hath been taught unto him, and shall have with a good will obeyed the commandments of God, let him, I say, be certain that this veritable and loyal wisdom, shall be accorded unto him, and also that the perfidious Belial can do no otherwise than become his slave, together with all his pestiferous generation. However, I pray the true God, who governeth, ruleth over, and maintaineth all that he hath created, that thou, O Lamech, my son, or whomsoever he may be unto whom thou shalt have granted this sacred operation, mayest work it out, having always before thee the fear of God, and in no way use it for evil, because God the Eternal hath wished herein to leave us our free will, but woe unto him who shall abuse his divine grace. Yet I say not but that if an enemy should attempt thy life, that it is permissible unto thee if necessary to destroy him, but in any other case lay not thine hand unto the sword, but use gentler methods. Be kind and affable unto every one. One may also serve a friend without harm unto oneself. David and King Solomon could have destroyed their enemies in an instant, but they did not so, in imitation of God himself, who chastiseth not unless he is outraged. If thou shalt perfectly observe these rules, all the following symbols and an infinitude of others will be granted unto thee by thy holy guardian angel, thou thus living for the honor and glory of the true and only God, for thine own good, and that of thy neighbor. Let the fear of God be ever before the eyes and the heart of him who shall possess this divine wisdom and sacred magic. The first chapter. Who know all manner of things past and future, which be not, however, directly opposed to God, and to his most holy will. To know all things past and future in general. To know things appertaining unto the future. To know things appertaining unto the future. Things to happen in war. Things past and forgotten. Tribulations to come. Things propitious to come. Things past regarding enemies. To know the signs of tempests. To know the secrets of war. To know true and false friends. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with this illustration. Following notes to these chapters one have classed under various heads for greater convenience of reference, thinking that besides the explanations of most of the magical names employed in the symbols, it would also be of assistance to the occult student to be able to see at a glance, briefly stated at the end of each chapter, the substance of the information especially referring thereto, given by Abraham the Jew in other parts of the work, notably towards the end of the second book. Under A. Therefore I have stated by what powers the symbols of each particular chapter are manifested. Under B. The names of the sub-princes of the evil spirits who are the special overseers of the execution of the effect desired. Under C. Whether the operations of the chapter in question can be to an extent performed by the familiar spirits, or not. Under D. An abridgment of any especial instructions given by Abraham in the parts of the work. Under E. I have given the meanings of most of the names employed in the squares, as far as possible, and also any additional remarks which seemed necessary. These magical symbols of this third book consist solely of squares of letters, which may be roughly divided into 4 distinct classes. Those in which the whole of the square is occupied by letters. In this form the double acrostic arrangement is especially marked, though in some few cases it is slightly varied by the introduction of a different name. Those in which part of the square is left vacant, the letters being arranged in the form of what is called in geometry a gnomon. Those in which the central part of the square is left vacant, the letters forming a border round the void part. Those of more irregular disposition, and in which in some instances single letters are placed separately in the vacant part of the square. It will be remarked that in nearly all cases these names arranged in the Squares represent generally the effect to be produced, or in other words, simply the Hebrew or other appellations of the result to which the square is to be applied. At the beginning of each chapter is placed a numbered list of the effects to be obtained by the use of each symbol there given. Then follow the squares themselves, the original MS. These squares have been also numbered to correspond with the list at the beginning of each chapter, but from the evident difference in the ink this has been done later, though the handwriting is the same. I think also that in several cases the numbers to the squares have been misplaced, and though usually the natural sequence of is adhered to, yet occur. Generally they are in a more irregular order, as in the TH chapter, for example, where they run thus. The squares in the original MS. All of the same size, subdivided. According to the exigencies of the case, though convenience of printing has prevented this equality of size being adhered to in the present work. In most instances the gnomons and borders are ruled off from the vacant part, but this rule is not adhered to in all cases in the original MS. The letters in the squares are Roman capitals. In some few instances 2 letters are placed in the same small square, or subdivision, of the larger square. Notes to Chapter 1. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon execute the opera tunes hereof by means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. Take the symbol in your hand, place it under your hat or cap, upon the top of your head, and you will be secretly answered by the spirit who will execute that which you wish. This mode of operation will evidently be applicable to many of the chapters. E. No. Is a square of squares, and is a complete specimen of double acrostic arrangement. Melon, though Greek-sounding, has here hardly a meaning if derived from either melos, a fruit or other tree, or from melon, a precious thing, or article of value. It seems rather derived from the Hebrew mlvn equals a diversity of things, or matters. Rago is perhaps from Greek ira, a question, or inquiry, and ago, to conduct or decide. Hebrew rgo equals to disrupt or analyze. Lamal, probably from Chaldaic mla equals fullness, entirety. Gari from Hebrew ogr equals a swallow or swiftly flying thing. No limb from Hebrew, no limb equals hidden or covered things. Whence we may extract the following as the formula of this square: various questions fully examined and analyzed, and that quickly, and even things carefully hidden and concealed. This rule we can apply to discover the formulas of other squares. No. Is a square of squares, and is also a complete specimen of double acrostic. Thalma from Chaldee term equals strongly defended places, or citadels. Higanam from Hebrew or Chaldee gnn or gnm equals to defend. Gogana, perhaps from Hebrew gg equals a roof or covering or protection from above. Rajagar, perhaps from Chaldaic ru. It must be remembered that, though I here transliterate the letter ain by o, it has really the power of a gh as well. It is a sound difficult of comprehension by a non-Orientalist, equals to break up, or breach. Anagogi probably from Greek anagogi, the act of raising or elevating. Manager from Hebrew mno, to restrain, stop, put a barrier to, or contain by a barrier. Marit from Hebrew amth equals word or speech. The whole idea of this formula seems to be the making forcible way to a defended place or matter. No. Is a square of squares, and again a perfect form of double acros. Hic, dore, from dvr Hebrew equals a habitation. Raya perhaps from Latin aurea equals to rise or be born. Reinir perhaps from Hebrew near equals to renew. Aero perhaps from arr to curse. Herod from Hebrew sage rd equals shaking, trembling. No. Is a square of squares, and again a perfect double acrostic. Nabi from Hebrew nba equals to prophesy. Dare perhaps from Heb. I equals a bird of omen. Bakab from Heb. Cab equals in trouble. Hyada from Hebrew idh equals sent forward, or thrown. Ibn from ihb Hebrew equals to give or bring. Hence the formula would be somewhat to prophesy by omens the troubles to come, the which is much more applicable to know. The tribulations to come, than to know, which is for the things to happen in war. Know is a double acrostic of squares, written from Hebrew nd equals to remove and athn equals strongly. Silero from Hebrew bshl equals to ripen, and Chaldaic aro equals the earth. Diamat from Hebrew dr equals to encompass or include, and mount equals things forgotten or slipped aside. Lamel from Hebrew Elim and Alh equals God of the mighty ones. Tamarid from Hebrew Thmr equals straight like a palm tree, and id equals put forward. Oralis equals from Hebrew equals orl equals superfluous, and ish equals the substance. Notvan from nth equals to stretch out, and dn equals to contend or rule. No is a double acrostic of squares. Therapy from Hebrew shrp equals to burn. Ayat from Hebrew r equals a river, and rph equals to abate or slacken. Rakia from Hebrew rkk equals to become faint, to become softened. Ikar from Hebrew okr equals to trouble or disturb. Priara from prr equals to shatter or break up. Paris from Hebrew prs equals to break in pieces, to divide, or part in sunder. This will give a formula of trouble. No is a double acrostic of squares. Malak from Hebrew mlch equals salt, also that which is easily dissolved, to dissolve. Manik from mnk equals a chain, or from amn, stability. Lanana from lnn equals to lodge, or take up one's abode. Ananal from an equals labor, and nlh, to complete or finish. Zanama perhaps from qnm equals odoriferous. Helam perhaps from hcl equals spacious, as a palace. No is a double acrostic of squares. Kosam from Hebrew qsm equals to divine or prognosticate. Bode from Hebrew obd equals a servant. Sophos from Greek sophos equals wise, learned, skillful. Dobo perhaps from db equals to murmur. Mesok from Hebrew msk equals to mingle or intermix. No is a double acrostic of squares. Rother is perhaps from rtt, trembling, tread, and hr to conceive or bring forth. Rory from Hebrew or equals laying bare, disclosing. Tara from Hebrew thvrh equals law, reason, or order. Harop from Hebrew hrh to bring forth, or from chrth equals to inscribe or mark down. Rita from rtt and thvr equals rear sun for dread. The whole formula will represent the disclosing of the reasons for dreading any terrible effect. No is another double acrostic of squares, and no one of squares. I have here given a sufficiently careful analysis of the meanings of the combinations formed by the letters in the preceding squares to give the reader a general idea of the formulas involved. To avoid an undue extension of these notes, I shall not usually analyze every name contained in each square, but shall confine myself in most cases to giving sufficient indications of the meanings of the principal words or words only, which are therein employed. The reader must remember also that in such an acrostic arrangement of the letters of words, half of those therein contained will simply be inversions of the principal word or words therein contained. For example, in no, Rehoboam is of course Mavoa written backwards. Eliali reads the same way backwards or forwards, and so does Horah, and Bekosia written backwards gives Izokib. Yet undoubtedly some of these words are to an extent translatable also, and in this case will be found to have a bearing on the subject matter of the square. Hebrew especially is a language in which this method will be found to work with a readiness unattainable in ordinary European languages, from the fact that its alphabet may be said to be entirely consonantal in character, even such letters as Aleph, Vor, and Yod, being rather respectively, a drawing in of the breath than the letter A, V rather than U and Y rather than I. Also in common with all really ancient languages, the system of verbal roots from which all the words of the language are derived has this effect, viz., that the majority of combinations of 2 or 3 letters will be found to be a verbal root, bearing definite meaning. Besides all this, in the Kabbalah each letter of the Hebrew alphabet is treated as having a complete sphere of hieroglyphic meanings of its own, whence the most important ancient Hebrew names and words can be treated by the Kabbalistic initiate as in fact so many formulas of spiritual force. have been thus lengthy in explanation in order that the reader may have some idea of the reason of the construction and use of these magic squares. The second chapter, to obtain information concerning, and to be enlightened upon all sorts of propositions and all doubtful sciences. All three generally for the above effect. Notes to Chapter 2. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested partly by the angels, and partly by the evil spirits. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Abramelin execute the operations hereof by the means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent execute the operations of this chapter. D. Take the symbol in your hand, and name what information you require. In the second book, the remarks given concerning this chapter are evidently far more applicable to the third chapter, and I have therefore given them there instead of here. E. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Alap from Hebrew alap equals a doctor, teacher, leader, ea, a person who at the same time leads and instructs his following. Hence also this word means a bull as the leader of the herd. Uriel, Hebrew Oriel equals light of God, is the well-known name of one of the archangels. Pulla in Latin means both a foul, and also light friable earth, but is probably here derivable rather from the Hebrew plh, meaning to classify or arrange. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Alamd is evidently from Hebrew mlnd equals a stimulus or spur to exertion. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Dilun may be from the Greek ikdalon, which means not afraid of, from ek in composition, and dalon, frightened, cowardly. The third chapter will cause any spirit to appear and take any form, such as of man, ani, mal, bird, etc. It will appear in the form of a serpent. To make them appear in the shape of any animal. In human form. In the form of a bird. Notes to Chapter 3. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angel or by the guardian angel. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Abramelin execute the operations hereof by means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits do not execute the operations of this chapter. D. Take the symbol in the hand, and name the spirit desired, who will appear in the form commanded. E. It will be noticed at once that of the four symbols of this chapter, the first has the name of the archangel Uriel, and the three others those of three of the chief princes of the demons, viz. Lucifer, Leviathan, and Satan. No is an acrostic of squares. Uriel from Hebrew Oriel equals light of God. Rami from Hebrew Mai equals deceit. Mimi is either from Imm equals the sea, or great waters, or from Imim equals mules. Imar is probably from Amr or Imr equals to speak. Neru is the reverse of Uriel, Ea, Uriel written backwards. This formula seems to show that the symbol should be numbered instead of. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Lucifer from Lucifer, Latin, equals light bearer. This square should probably be numbered. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Leviathan from Hebrew equals the piercing or twisting serpent. This square should probably be numbered. No. Is an acrostic of squares. Satan from Hebrew shtn equals an adversary. Adama from Hebrew admh equals reddish earth. The fourth chapter. Divers visions. I. For mirrors of glass and crystal. In caverns and subterranean places. A. In the air. In rings and circlets. In wax. In fire. In the moon. In the water. In the hand. Notes to Chapter 4. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Oriens, Paimonaraton, Abramelin execute the operations hereof by means of their common ministers. C. The operations of this chapter can also be to an extent performed by the familiar spirits. D. No special instructions are given regarding this chapter in the second book. E. No is a mnemonic square of squares taken from a square of squares. Gileanin equals Chaldaic Livnim equals mirrors. No is a mnemonic square of squares out of a square of squares. Ethanim equals Ethnim. Heb equals vaults, ovens. No is a mnemonic square of squares out of a square of squares. A parrot, Latin equals let it appear. No is a square of squares. Bedza Hebrew BTZR a gold orna. Ent. Elil equals Ali Ali Hebrew, towards me. Zept Hebrew SPD equals he struck. Reesdeb equals perhaps Hebrew, RSHDB head or chief point of a discourse. No is a square of squares. Got equals perhaps Heb. NHG, he leads. Rezo equals probably Greek, second, purse. Sing. From erome for erome, to demand. Or interrogate. Yarag equals perhaps from Heb. Yao, to diminish. Umar, perhaps Greek, an assembly or synthesis. Tijun equals perhaps from Greek tog, why or wherefore when used in an adverbial sense. No is a square of squares. Nasi equals Hebrew NSI equals my banner or symbol. Apis equals the Egyptian sacred bull. Zipa perhaps from SPH equals Hebrew to consume. Isan equals perhaps from Heb. Isn equals to sleep. No is a square of squares. Cohen should perhaps be Cohen equals a Jewish priest. Orari, Latin equals to pray. Hassa, Heb. HSH equals to keep silence. Raro perhaps from Heb. ARR to curse. Hog equals perhaps Heb. NHG equals to lead. No is a mnemonic square of squares out of squares. Udmon. Perhaps from Heb. DMO equals tears but also liquids or fluids. No is a mnemonic square of squares out of squares. Lile equals Hebrew lil equals night, darkness. The fifth chapter. How we may retain the familiar spirit's bond or free in whatsoever form. In the form of a lion. D. In the form of a page. In the form of a flower. In the form of a horseman. In the form of an eagle. In the form of a dog. In the form of a bear. In the form of a soldier. In the form of an old man. In the form of a Moor. If, in the form of a serpent. In the form of an ape. Notes to Chapter 5. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Oriens, Hymen, Araton, and Amaimon execute the opera tunes hereof by means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits can hardly be said so much of themselves to be able to execute the operations of this chapter, as under the rule of the aforementioned spirits. D. Each person can have 4 familiar spirits and no more. The first work, from sunrise to midday, the second from midday till sunset, the third from sunset to midnight, and the fourth from midnight till sunrise. Such spirits may also be loaned to friends, in which case you can avail yourself of another ordinary spirit in place. E. The square numbered is not however placed first in order in the Ms, but fifth. It is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Anakim equals Hebrew Onkaim equals giants, the root onq also equals a necklace or talk. This word Anakim hardly appears to have any reference to the form of a lion. No is a gnomon of squares again, taken from a square of squares, and is in the misplaced sixth in order. Zephyr in Hebrew means a young lion, and this square should probably therefore be numbered. No is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares, and in the Ms occupies the first place in order. Iketis, Greek, means a maidservant. feminine page. This square therefore should probably be numbered. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares? Paras equals Hebrew prsh, a horse, or horseman, while prs equals an ossifrage, a bird of the hawk or eagle kind. This square is apparently correctly numbered, though in the MS, it is in the second place. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares? Raka is apparently from the Hebrew rqh meaning vain, empty, and does not seem to have any particular reference to any of the forms mentioned for the symbols. No. Is again a gnomon of squares, taken from a square of squares. It is placed fourth in order in the MS. Passis may be from the dative plural of the Greek word korn equals a dog, but in Hebrew it would mean numbering, computing. No. Is a border of squares taken from a square of squares? Hera. Zhi, perhaps from prk, savagery. Eb is a bear in Hebrew. No. Is a square of squares? Riza, perhaps from Latin riza, a mocker or jester. Iseri, perhaps from Hebrew or Chaldaic root, isr, to punish or whip. Zeeks, perhaps from schsh equals reborn by hope. No. Is again a square of squares. Nessa equals Hebrew, nshr, an eagle, which seems to show that this square should be numbered. Alay is probably Ali, Hebrew equals my God. Zeeps, shps equals the hair on the lip, the moustache. Reason equals rsn heb, equals a bridle or bit. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares? Pethan equals Hebrew, pthn, an asp or venomous serpent, whence this square should probably be numbered. No. Is a square of squares? Kaelf equals klp, Hebrew, a hammer. Array from Hebrew arr to curse, cursed. The mal perhaps means in. Speaking from mll, Hebrew, to speak. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares? Koba equals perhaps Hebrew kbh equals to extinguish. The sixth chapter. Who cause minds to be pointed out, and to help forward all kinds of work connected therewith. To prevent caves from falling in. U. To show a gold mine. To cause work to be done in mines. To make work done in inaccessible places. To make them tunnel mountains. To cause all water to be withdrawn from the mines. To make the spirits bring timber. To make them found and purge metals and separate gold and silver. Notes to Chapter 6. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Astaroth and Asmodeus execute together the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. No special instructions are given regarding this chapter in the second book. E. No. Is a border of squares taken from a square of squares? Talar equals perhaps from thla, equals a worm which pierces holes in the ground. No. Is a border of squares taken from a square of squares? Alka. Brucey may mean supported by planks or props, or beams. So, probably, this square should be numbered. No. Is a border of squares taken from a square of squares? Cad. SAR perhaps from QTZR equals to shorten or abbreviate a matter or work. No. Is a square of squares. Pelagium, Hebrew Pulgium divisions. Strata, etc. No. Is a square of squares. Hiloin equals Hebrew Cloim, excavations. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Nakab, Hebrew, NQB equals piercing. Perforation. No. Is a square of squares. Hittic may mean equals to arrange in a store place. Kanat recalls a name used on some of the Gnostic magical gems. Tanit is the name of a Tyrian goddess. No. Is a gnomon of squares out of a square of squares. Merok. From Hebrew mrq equals to cleanse, purge, or refine. The seventh chapter. O cause the spirits to perform with facility and promptitude all netshesh. Zari chemical labours and operations, as regardeth metals especially. U. To make all metals. To make them perform the operations. To make them teach chemistry. Notes to Chapter 7. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels, or by the guardian angel. B. Ashtaroth and Asmodeus together execute the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. Her. D. No special instructions are given regarding this chapter in the second book. E. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Metallo from Greek metallon equals in metal, mineral, or mining work. No. Is a square of squares. Tabat, Chaldaic thibth equals heads, or sections of classification of operations. Aruka perhaps from Arak, adhering to. No. Is a square of squares. Pomano, probably from Greek hip. Pomane's an ingredient used in filters, etc., perhaps put here for chemical drugs in general. The 8th chapter. To excite tempests. I. To cause hail. U. To cause snow. To cause rain. To cause thunder. Notes to Chapter 8. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested partly by the angels and partly by the evil spirits. B. Ashtaroth executes the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot execute the operations of this chapter. D. To excite a tempest, give the signal above you, and touch the symbol. On the top. To make it cease, touch it underneath. E. No. Is a square of squares. Canamal equals Hebrew CINML, E. Hailstones of great size. No. Is a border of taken from a square of squares. The cat, TKO. Hebrew, has the sense of immersed in, overflowed by. No. A gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Zagru, Hebrew skro, a most vehement rain and tempest. No. A square of squares. Hamag, perhaps from Hebrew, mock. To compress, or crush, or press. The 9th chapter. Who transform animals into men, and men into animals, etc. To transform men into asses. Into stags or deer. U. Into elephants. Into wild boars. Into dogs. Into wolves. Animals into stones. Notes to Chapter 9. A. The symbols of this chapter are only manifested by the evil spirits. B. Ashtaroth and Asmodeus together execute the signs and operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot execute the operations of this chapter. D. Let the being, whether man or animal, see the symbol, and then touch them suddenly with it, when they will appear transformed, but this is only a kind of fascination. When you wish to make it cease, place the symbol upon the head and strike it sharply with the wand, and the spirit will make things resume their ordinary condition. E. No. Is a square of squares. Imimii is evidently from Hebrew. Imim equals mules. A very perfect acrostic. No. Is a square of squares also. Iasilla, Hebrew ale equals a deer. No. Is a border of taken from a square of squares. Adsire. Hebrew KZR equals fierce, savage. ZHTZR, perhaps, the tusk of an elephant. But Gs equals a wild boar, whence this square should perhaps be numbered. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares, 2 letters. Psi, are allotted to 1 square. Pedask is perhaps from BD, a limb, and SK. Covered or protected, as with a strong skin. It may thus stand for the elephant, as having powerful and thick-skinned limbs. If so, this square should be num. Bered. No. Is a square of squares. Kaltef. The Hebrew word for dog is KLB. This square, it will be noted, is not a perfect acrostic. No. Is a square of squares. The CB is probably from Zab, a wolf. This square also is not at all perfect as an acrostic. No. is a square of squares. Zikadamion, probably from Dimivn equals similitude of, and sig, scoria or lava, or square, stone, root of sequel, to stone. The 10th chapter, will hinder any necromantic or magical operations from taking effect, except those of the Kabbalah and of this sacred magic. To undo any magic soever. To heal the bewitched. To make magical storms cease. To discover any magic. To hinder sorcerers from operating. Notes to Chapter 10. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels, or by the guardian angel. B. Mogith executes the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chapter. D. No special instructions are given concerning this chapter. E. No. Consists of squares containing letters, Li of Kodselim. Occupying square, taken from a square of squares. Kodselim and Kohabim may be from Xelim, the foolish ones, and Kabim, the mourning ones, Hebrew. No. Border of squares taken from a square of squares. Latchet, perhaps from Hebrew LCHSH equals to enchant. No. A square of squares. Paradilon, probably from Greek para. Against, and dalon, perverse, or miserable, or unfortunate. No. A square of squares. Aura, from Hebrew shrh, to be. Enraged, or hrh, to conceive, or bring forth. No. A square of squares. Mechana from Hebrew mchnh, a. Fortification, castle, or defense. Madasal, from matzel, about me, before me, at my side. The 11th chapter. O cause all kinds of books to be brought to one, and whether lost or stolen. For books of astrology. U. For books of magic. For books of chemistry. Notes to Chapter 11. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels, or by the guardian angel. B. Mogith alone executes the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot execute the operations of this chapter. D. Many ancient books of magic, etc., have been lost or destroyed, in some cases by the wish of the good spirits, in others by the machinations of the evil spirits. These symbols you can have many supposed extinct works brought to you, Abraham states, but adds that he could never copy them, because the writing disappeared as fast as he wrote it. Notwithstanding this, he was permitted to read some of them. E. No. Is a square of squares. Holi, probably from Hebrew kli, meaning the whole, in the sense of the whole universe. No. Is a square of squares. Zera, perhaps from Hebrew saw, a whirlwind, or perhaps from shore equals terrible, and is also used to express a kid, or a species of shaggy satyr-like demon, from the word being used to signify hair. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Hehek is probably from Hebrew khch, meaning to conceal, obscure, or shut up. The 12th chapter. Who know the secrets of any person. I. To know the secret of letters. U. To know the secret of words. To know secret operations. For the military counsels of a captain. To know the secrets of love. To know what riches a person possesseth. To know the secret of all arts. Notes to Chapter 12. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Asmodeus alone executes the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent execute the operations of this chapter. D. Touch the symbol and name aloud the person whose secret you desire to know, and the spirit will whisper the answer into your ear. E. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Megillah, from Hebrew mglh equals to reveal or disclose. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Hara, perhaps from king's royal hussars to appear, Hebrew sympathy, perhaps from bash, evil, and zmh, thought. No. Consists of a nomona from a square of squares. Mob. Had, from Hebrew mobbed equals a deed or act. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Milchama. From Hebrew mlchmh equals war. Adirachi from diarche, Hebrew, equals way, clan, idea. Elim, Heb, equals mighty ones. No. Consists of taken from a square of squares. Zedida is either from did equals a spark, or from did, the root of the words, love, delights, breasts. Dirarid from Hebrew dr equals liberty. Hadidek from dik equals thy loves or delights. No. Consists of from a square of squares. Asamin from Hebrew. Smim equals treasure houses, garners, mapide perhaps from bid equals oppression, misfortune. No. A nomona from a square of squares. Melabar from lab equals art or science. The 13th chapter. Who cause a dead body to revive, and perform all the functions which a living person would do, and this during a space of 7 years, by means of the spirits. U. From the rising of the sun until midday. From midday until the setting of the sun. From the setting of the sun until midnight. From midnight until the rising of the sun. Notes to chapter 13. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels and in part by the evil spirits. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon execute by means of their servitors the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot execute the operations of this chapter. D. In several places Abraham warns the reader that this is the most difficult operation of any, because for it to be brought about, the concurrence of all the chief spirits must be obtained. Watch for the moment when the person dies, and then at once place upon his body towards the cardinal points the symbol required. Similar symbols are to be sewn into the garments he wears. Abraham moreover adds that by this means, one can however only prolong the life for years, and no more. E. No. Is a square of squares. Ezekiel is from Hebrew. Xkal, the well-known name of the prophet, derived from zq, to bind. No. Is a square of squares. It will be noticed that a small o is placed at the end of each word in the last square towards the right hand. Migdal is from mgdl, a strong tower. No. Is a square of squares. Yosua, the well-known Hebrew name, signifies he shall save. No. Is also a square of squares. Hega is from pgr equals a dead inactive carcass, whether of man or of beast. The 14th chapter. He 12 symbols for the 12 hours of the day and of the night, to render oneself invisible unto every person. Notes to chapter 14. A. The symbols of this chapter be manifested in part by the evil spirits, and in part by the good angels. B. Magad is said to rule the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits do not execute the operations of this chapter. D. To render oneself invisible is said by Abraham to be a very easy matter. This chapter contains 12 symbols for 12 different spirits submitted unto the Prince Magad, who are all of the same force. Place the symbol upon the top of your head, under your head covering, and then you will become invisible, while on taking it away you will appear visible again. E. No. Is a square of squares, whence squares are taken which are arranged somewhat in the form of a capital F. Alamala is probably from the Greek, ale wandering, and melas equals black, darkness, i.e., wandering darkness. No. Consists of squares arranged somewhat in an F form, and taken from the square of squares. Zafa is from tzph equals a covering or shroud. No. Is a square of squares. Casa implies formed by coagulation. No. Consists of squares in an F form, taken from a square of squares. Letter signifies adhering closely. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Coda equals darkness and obscurity. No. Consists of squares, somewhat irregularly disposed, taken from a square of squares. Similar equals involved, to clothe or surround on all sides. No. is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Zia equals restriction and compression. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Anana is a word expressing earnest desire for some then defect to be supplied. No. Consists of taken from a square of squares. Almond to hide, or conceal, and recalls the biblical name of Teman. Nidak means accumulated darkness. No. Is a gnomon of squares from a square of squares. Omen signifies coverings or shrouds of concealment. No. Is a border of squares from a square of squares. Alexigni. Fies thy mists. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Alampi is the Greek adjective alamps, meaning without the light of the sun. Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant is Hebrew and means he will dissolve. It will be remarked that all these names distinctly express some idea relating to invisibility. The 15th chapter, or the spirits to bring us anything we may wish to eat or to drink, and even all kinds of food that we can imagine. For them to bring us bread, meat, wine of all kinds, fish, cheese. Notes to chapter 15. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Asmodee and Magat together execute the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. As for these symbols and all like ones appertaining unto this chapter, when you shall wish to make use of them, you shall put them between two plates, dishes, or jugs, close together on the outside of a window, and before a quarter of an hour shall have passed you will find and will have that which you have demanded, but you must clearly understand that with such kinds of viands you cannot nourish men for more than 2 days. For this food, although it be appreciable by the eyes, and by the mouth, doth not long nourish the body, which hath soon hunger again, seeing that this food gives no strength to the stomach. Know also that none of these viands can remain visible for more than hours, the which period being past, fresh ones will be requisite. E. This chapter naturally brings to one's mind the descriptions of the magic feasts in the Arabian Nights and elsewhere. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Yan means let there be wine. Evidently therefore this square should be numbered. Instead of no. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Basar means flesh. No. Consists of squares in the form of the Roman capital letter E. Taken from a square of squares. Lechem means bread, Knoha implies corn, and Meshel means a cake. Therefore this should evidently be numbered, instead of. Meshel also means a window. No. Is a square of squares. Bikad should be spelt with a G instead. For C, the meaning is bring forth fish. Kamak means meal, or flour. Phara may be from the Greek adverb apha equals straightway or forthwith, but, if taken as a Hebrew root, may mean bring forth fruit. No. Is a gnomon of squares and other supplementary ones taken from a square of squares. Lebhina is from lba equals milk, and inh2. Squeeze. The 16th chapter. Who find and take possession of all kinds of treasures, provided that they be not at all magically guarded. U. For treasure of silver, or silver money. For gold money. For a great treasure. For a small treasure. For an unguarded treasure. For copper money. For gold in ingots. For silver in ingots. For jewels. For ancient metals and coins. For a treasure hidden by a particular person. For pearls. For diamonds. For rubies. For Balassius rubies. For emeralds. For worked gold. For silver plate. For statues. For specimens of ancient art. Notes to Chapter 16. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Astaro and Araton both execute the operations hereof by their ministers, yet not together, but each separately. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. Select the symbol of the treasure desired, and the spirit will then show it to you. Then place the symbol at once upon the treasure, and it will no longer be possible for it to disappear into the ground, nor for it to be carried away. Furthermore, any spirits which may be guarding it will thus be put to flight, and you can then dispose of the treasure as you wish. E. No. Is a species of border of squares of which are occupied by letters, taken from a square of squares. Hifera means glory, beauty, a shining thing. Iti is the Chaldaic for is, are. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Zizp means silver. This square should therefore probably be numbered. Or. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Sigilla means treasure. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Nakat means probably. Stamped money. No. Is a square of squares. Magat is the name of one of the sub-princes. No. Is a gnomon of from a square of squares. Geel may mean a heap, but also a globular drop of dew. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Boson perhaps means a golden cup. No. Is a gnomon also of squares taken from a square of squares. Utser means restraint. No. Is a square of squares. Belial is the name of one of the four great chiefs of the evil spirits. No. Is a square of squares. Orion, the celebrated mythological name of the Greek hunter, and of the constellation, is perhaps used here as the name of a spirit. No. Is a border of squares taken from a square of squares. A means either a cutting off or else a superinducing. No. Is a square of squares. No. Is a square of squares. Bisalon is perhaps from IHLM equals dear. Ons. The root ikal means abiding strength and hardness. No. Is a border of squares from a square of squares. Zega means respectively to break forth and to shut in, according as the root begins with S or SH. No. Consists of squares from a square of. No. Is a square of squares. Starro is one of the sub-princes of the evil spirits. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Kona means possessions. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Kahil means gathered together. No. Is a square of squares. Araton is one of the sub-princes of the evil spirits. No. Is a square of squares. Rimal is evidently here used as the name of a spirit. Rin is a Chaldaic word meaning angelic watchers over the kingdoms of the earth. Ryan may also come from this word. The 17th chapter. Fly in the air and travel any whither. In a black cloud. In a white cloud. You. In the form of an eagle. In the form of a crow, or raven. In the form of a vulture. In the form of a crane. Notes to Chapter 17. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon execute the opera tunes hereof by means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. Name the place aloud to which you wish to travel, and place the symbol upon your head under the bonnet or the hat, but take well heed that it does not fall from you, which would be very dangerous. Do not as a rule travel by night, and select a calm and serene day for the operation. E. No. Is a square of squares. Pasma implies protection. ERMS is the Hebrew word used in the verse, "Thou shalt go upon the lion and the." No. Consists of squares taken from a square of. Nan means great labor. No. Is a square of squares. Holop means to travel. No. Is a square of squares. Udak means to pass on from one place to another. No. Is a square of squares. Roller is perhaps from roll to move. Hurriedly. No. Is a square of squares. Natsa means to flee or fly quickly. The 18th chapter. To heal divers maladies. To heal leprosy. U. For chapped hands, etc. For old ulcers. For pestilential diseases. For inveterate paralysis. For malignant fevers. For bodily pains. For seasickness. For vertigo and giddiness. For the miserere, a most violent and dangerous kind of colic, accompanied by dreadful vomiting. For dropsy. For all kinds of wounds. Notes to chapter 18. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. A Maimon performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. The bandages of the sick person having been undone and cleaned, and the unguent, the compresses, and the bandages having been replaced, put the symbol upon them and leave it for about a quarter of an hour, then take it away, and keep it for use upon another occasion. But if it be an internal malady, you must place the symbol, the written part downwards, upon the bare head of the patient. These symbols may be seen and examined without any danger, yet it is always better that they should neither be seen nor handled by any other person than yourself. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. ESA. Rat equals a stroke or plague, the leprosy. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Bua signifies to clear. Way. No. A square of squares. Metsora signifies flowing sores or ulcers. No. Is a square of squares. Rechem means closely seizing. No. Is a square of squares. Rokia signifies general evil. No. Is a square of squares. Beatum equals the internal parts. No. Is a square of squares. Biba equals in purifying or cleansing. No. Is a square of squares. Eleos, the Greek word hals equals the sea. From its saltness. Elos means calm still water. No. Is a square of squares. Kadeakat means vertigo, turning of the head. No. Is a square of squares. Rogamos from Latin rogamus, we pray. No. Is a square of squares. Ditcha means secret. No. Is a square of squares. Hapir means to shatter or break. The 19th chapter. Or every description of affection and love. To be beloved by one's wife, or husband. For some especial love. E. To be beloved by a relation. For a maiden in particular. To acquire the affection of a judge. To make oneself beloved by a married person. To make oneself beloved by a widow. By a girl already promised in marriage. By a maiden in general. By some especial prince. By some especial king. To obtain the friendship of some particular person. To have that of a great man. To be beloved by a woman. To make oneself beloved by ecclesiastics. To make oneself beloved by a master. To make oneself beloved by a mistress. To make oneself beloved by infidels. By the Pope, by an emperor, or by kings. For adulteries in general. Notes to chapter 19. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Probably Beelzebub performs this operation, as those of the 20th chapter are submitted to him, and these two chapters are classed together by Abraham the Jew in his special instructions, the one being the exact reverse of the other. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. Name aloud the person or persons by whom you wish to be loved, and move the symbol under whose class they come. But if it be not for yourself that you are operating, but for two or more other persons, whether for love or for hatred, you should still name such persons aloud, and move the symbols of the class or classes under which they come. Also, if possible, it is a good thing to touch them with a symbol, on the bare skin, if you can. Under this heading are included all classes of goodwill and affection, among the which Abraham says that the most difficult thing is to make oneself or others beloved by religious persons. No is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of Godim. Means love's pleasures. No consists of squares arranged like a capital letter E taken from a square of squares. Raya means a female companion. No consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Moda equals adorned as for a bridal. No consists of squares from a square of. No consists of squares taken from. Almana equals a virgin. Hence evidently this should be numbered and not, while probably no should be here placed. No consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Ola means a married woman, but especially a bride. No a nomona from a square of. Lamentary means a widow. No a square of squares. Act equals remote offspring. No this has a strong likeness to the well-known satyr, Aripo. Tenet, opera, rotors. It is a square of squares. Salem equals peace. Repo equals he distills. Level equals unto fullness. Upon the dry ground. Veloce equals in quick motion, or perhaps better stirring it up into quickness, i.e., life. The former sentence is capable of a rather free Latin translation, thus, Satyr equals the creator. Repo equals slow moving. Tenet equals maintains. Opera equals his creations. Rotors equals as vortices. No is a square of squares. Debarm signifies influential persons. No a square of squares from a square of. EHHB signifies to love. Bear signifies in Hebrew to waste or consume. No a square of squares. Ielda signifies a girl. No consists of squares arranged like the capital letter F, and taken from a square of squares. Betula equals a virgin. No consists of squares from a square of. Midida is from a Hebrew root, signifying objects of love. Dilika means to eagerly pursue, or to burn as with a fever. Dokaka equals pierced. No squares from a square of. Zakal means a wise person. No a square of squares. Kapir equals protector. No squares from a square of. Far means passionate. No a nomona from a square of. Tafa equals to join together, to connect. No is a gnomon of squares from one of squares. Zera means powerful, high in authority. No is also a gnomon of squares from a square of squares. Catan equals to adhere closely. The 20th chapter. We cite every description of hatred and enmity, discords, quarrels, contentions, combats, battles, loss, and damage. To excite quarrels and fights. For enmity in general. For enmities of kings and of the great. For particular enmities. For enmities among women. To cause a general war. To render anyone unfortunate in combat. To put discord in an army. For a particular discord. To sow discord among ecclesiastics. For every description of vengeance. To cause battles, losses, etc. Notes to chapter 20. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Beelzebub performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chapter. D. See instructions for chapter 19, which serve equally for that, and the present operation. No Consists of squares irregularly arranged and taken from a square of squares. Hannah means jealous. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Zalak equals to cast down or prostrate. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Roken implies persons. And power. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Atlitus is a corruption. The Greek adjective atlatos, insufferable, not to be borne. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Tzima equals bodily. Strength. No. Consists of from a square of. Zina equals hatred. No. Is a gnomon of squares from a square of. Satan is the name of one of the chief evil spirits and has been elsewhere explained. No. Consists of squares in the form of a capital F, taken from a square. Squares. Lophitos is evidently from the Greek lophesis, meaning rest. Cessation from action, PA. In this case military action. No. Consists of squares arranged in the form of an F, and taken from a square of squares. Gibor equals strength, might, severity. No. Is a square of squares. Nokum, vengeance. No. Is also a square of squares. Kelim equals for all kinds of things. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Kerubah, assault. Tak. The 21st chapter. Who transform oneself, and take different faces and forms. To appear old. To take on the appearance of an old woman. To appear young. To transform oneself into a girl. To appear like a young child. Notes to chapter 21. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the evil spirits. B. Maggot performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. This is rather a fascination than anything else. Take the symbol desired in your left hand and stroke the face therewith. Abraham further observes that such an operation performed by an ordinary magician would be easily seen through by the possessor of the sacred magic, while on the contrary this latter would be safe from detection by ordinary sorcerers. E. The student will note in these squares the marked position of the letter Q, as in many other cases where the effect aimed at seems to be rather a deception of the senses of others. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Zarkan means old. No. Is a gnomon of squares with the letter Q added, from a square. Squares. Diskena equals in the likeness of an old woman. 'Tis to be remarked that this square is rather oblong, squares long by deep. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Disakan means to cover up or hide, but were it disaka it would mean as if one young. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Enik means thy dove. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Occur equals firstborn. The 22nd chapter. His chapter it only for evil, for with the symbols herein we can cast spells, and work every kind of evil, we should not avail ourselves hereof. To cast spells upon men. To bewitch beasts. To cast a spell upon the liver. This symbol should never be made use of. To cast a spell upon the heart. Upon the head and other parts of the body. 6. 5. Qaraqak. Lebhah. Emausa. QQAH. Notes to chapter 22. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the evil spirits. B. Beelzebub performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. Abraham warns strongly against use being made of this operation. The symbols should be either buried or concealed in places where the persons we wish to harm are likely to pass by, or, if possible, we can touch them with a symbol. E. No. Consists of from a square of squares. Kaladim means those who creep in insidiously. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Behemoth equals beasts? No. Consists of squares from a square of. Basim equals those that. Stamp down violently? No. Is a square of squares. Haste, Hebrew, if used in a bad sense. Overflowing of unrestrained lust. Zot, Hebrew enduring. Oros, equals Greek devouring, gluttonous. Tosa, equals Greek idle, useless. Debak, equals Hebrew equals to overtake and stick close. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Leber implies. Agony at the heart. No. Consists of squares. Karakak, thy baldness, also thy rending. Asunder. The 23rd chapter. Who demolish buildings and strongholds. To make a house fall to the ground. You. To destroy a town. To demolish strongholds. To ruin possessions and estates. Notes to chapter 23. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested by the evil spirits only. B. Astaro performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. No special instructions are given regarding this chapter by Abraham, the Jew. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Ave. Means a house or habitation. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Kaka to make void. Or empty. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Homahan. Means a stronghold. No. Consists of a nomon of squares from a square of squares. Inim means in affliction. The 24th chapter. Who discover any thefts that hath occurred. Jewels stolen. Money. You. Worked gold. Silver workmanship. Effects, such as furniture. Horses, and other animals. Notes to chapter 24. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Araton performs the operations hereof, and Magad also, but separately. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. No special instructions are given by Abraham regarding this chapter. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. The meaning of Kixalis is not apparent. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Kanebar probably. Conveys the idea of gain or possession. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Paid Seelan. May signify things of value set apart. No. The succession of numbers here is irregular, consists of squares. From a square of squares. Mora means to rebel against, to disobey. No. Consists of a square of squares. Herak means to involve or wrap up, also garments, etc. No. Is a nomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Tala means a young lamb, or kid, according to whether its root termi nates with Aleph or he. The 25th chapter. Walk upon, and operate under, water. To swim for hours without becoming wearied. You. To remain under water for hours. To rest upon the water for hours. Notes to chapter 25. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angel, or by the guardian angel. B. Abraham does not state to what prince this operation is submitted. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. No special instructions are given by Abraham regarding this chapter. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Aha. Rioma means a river of waters. No. Is a square of squares. No. Is a nomon of squares from a square of squares. Mayam equals abundant waters such as the sea. The 26th chapter. Who open every kind of lock, without a key, and without making any noise. To open doors. You. To open padlocks. To open larders, or charnel houses. To open strong boxes, or caskets. To open prisons. Notes to chapter 26. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Abramelin and Abramelin together perform the operations of this chapter. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. Touch the lock you wish to open with the side of the symbol which is written upon, and it will immediately open without noise or injury. When you wish to reclose it, touch it with the side of the symbol not written upon, and it will refasten and show no trace of having been opened. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. The gub signifies exalted or lifted up, as an ancient portcullis might be. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Ratok means a confining chain wreathed or fastened round anything. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Bariaka equals a place for food to be put. No. Consists of squares from a square of. The core may mean either to satisfy or to deal falsely, according as it is spelt with Q or K. No. Consists of squares from a square of. The 27th chapter. Will cause visions to appear. To make trellis work to be seen. A superb palace. U. Flowering meadows. Lakes and rivers. Vines with their grapes. Great fires. Divers mountains. Bridges and rivers. Woods and various kinds of trees. Cranes. Giants. Peacocks. Gardens. Wild boars. Unicorns. Beautiful country. A fruit garden or orchard. A garden with all kinds of flowers. To cause snow to appear. Different kinds of wild animals. Towns and castles. Various flowers. Fountains and clear springs of water. Lions. Singing birds. Horses. Eagles. Buffaloes. Dragons. Hawks and falcons. Foxes. Hares. Dogs. Griffins. Stags. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with this illustration. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with this illustration. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with this illustration. Take a moment to familiarize yourself with this illustration. Notes to Chapter 27. A. The symbols of this chapter are only manifested by the evil spirits. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Abramelin execute the opera tions hereof by the means of their common ministers. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. No especial instructions are given by Abraham regarding this chapter. E. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. The lak means to cast down, to cut down or fell, as trees, perhaps thus signifying the cut wood with which a trellis is made. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Hesp may mean the environs of a place. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Eodonia. From Hebrew root odn Eden, a delightful place, etc. No. Is a square of squares. Sarah equals either a storehouse or tray. Suri or to flow, according to its derivation. No. The order of the numbering of the squares is here changed. Consists. Squares taken from a square of squares. Talk means to wind. Bout. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Acropolis is a Greek word signifying citadel. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. The leg equals snow, whence perhaps this should be numbered instead of. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Omega equals pools of water, whence this should probably be numbered instead of. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Hayot is proba. Lie from Cheoth equals living creatures. It may also mean a cover, where live creatures abide. Perhaps it should be numbered. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Ekeb probably means a bird of the crane species. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Elu. Ak equals thy dwelling place, and perhaps this should be numbered. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Harak may mean flowering gardens. Perhaps this should be numbered. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. No. Is a gnomon of squares from a square of squares. Ulala may mean horned animals or tusked animals. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Hikayan equals a place where gourds grow. No. Is a gnomon of squares taken from a square of squares. Makor equals places digged. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Midras equals a place where productive plants grow. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Sahel equals rich. No. Should probably be numbered. It is a gnomon of from a square of squares. Aye equals a lion. No. Consists of from a square of squares. Limikos equals savage. Animals. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Sassas probably means horses, and this square should probably be numbered instead of. No. Consists of squares taken from a square of squares. Kikimis equals thistles and also some kinds of flowers. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Nessica cygni. VS fluids of various kinds. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Dobie equals a bear, and should evidently be otherwise numbered. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. No. Is a gnomon of squares from a square of squares. Para H equals a heifer, but also fruit, produce. No. Consists of squares from a square of. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Vanin is probably from BN, and meaning towns and villages, whence this should probably be num. Vered. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Reem unicorns, and also beasts of the beef kind, buffaloes, etc. Perhaps this square answers for as well. No. Consists of a gnomon of squares from a square of squares. Where equals rapacious birds. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Dual means a black lion, whence this square should be numbered probably. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Euripes may mean small beasts that run swiftly. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Arneb should probably be Arneb. It means a hare, whence this square should perhaps be num. Vered. No. Is a gnomon of squares from a square of. Isle probably means wild goats. No. Consists of squares from. Helef equals a dog, whence this square should probably be numbered. The 28th chapter. Oh, have as much gold and silver as one may wish, both to provide for one's necessities, and to live in opulence. To have coined gold. To have coined silver. To have silver in small coins. To have small change in copper, or bronze. Notes to chapter 28. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the angels or by the guardian angel. B. Oriens alone performs this operation. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. Place the symbol of the money you require in your purse, let it remain there for a short time, then put your right hand into your purse, and you will there find 7 pieces of the class of money you have wished for. This opera Dion should not be performed more than 3 times in the day. The pieces of money you do not use will disappear, which is why you should not ask for several kinds of money at the same time. And if you spend it, Both you and those into whose hands it passes will find it genuine. In another place Abraham says, that once only in your life you may ask your guardian angel for a large sum of money sufficient to represent a fortune, and that he himself had done so and obtained his request. No. Consists of from a square of squares. Zakor perhaps here means money. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Kesa may mean a kol. Section or heap. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Asape should be proba. Libispra equals much, many. No. Is a nomon of squares from. Matpa probably means let it be forthcoming, bring forth. The 29th chapter. To cause armed men to appear. To cause an army to appear. Armed men for one's defense. To cause a siege to appear. Notes to chapter 29. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested in part by the angels, and in part also by the evil spirits. B. Oriens, Paimon, Araton, and Amaimon execute the opera tunes hereof by the means of their common ministers. Paimon also performs this operation alone. C. The familiar spirits cannot well execute the operations of this chap. D. No special instructions are given by Abraham regarding this chapter, by which Abraham says, in the first book, that he himself had caused armed men to appear. No. Is a nomon of squares from a square of squares. Mechana equals an encampment. No. Consists of squares from a square of. Aharaka perhaps means an ambuscade. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. The 30th chapter. Who cause comedies, operas, and every kind of music and dances to appear. To cause all kinds of music to be heard. Music and extravagant balls. For all kinds of instruments to be played. For comedies, farces, and operas. In the original MS, these words fin des senior are written in this man. Near across and within the two last squares. Notes to chapter 30. A. The symbols of this chapter are manifested only by the evil spirits. B. Maggot performs the operations hereof. C. The familiar spirits can to an extent perform the operations of this chapter. D. No especial instructions are given by Abraham regarding this chapter. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Najana equals a stringed instrument. No. Consists of a nomon of squares from a square of squares. Ekola equals singing. No. Is a nomon of squares from a square of squares. Nitrogen equals musical instruments, probably. No. Consists of squares from a square of squares. Mekas means enchantment. This finishes the list of symbols set down by Abraham the Jew, the which I have given in their entirety, but I must of my own initiative warn any who may endeavor to use these signs, that unless animated by the purest and best motives they will find them react terribly against them, and that, if the preliminary period of 6 months' preparation advocated by Abramelin be not observed, the symbols will be practically worthless in their hands, for, as will be observed, the names in the squares for the most part are simply the statement of the ends desired to be accomplished thereby. Finally, I will quote the following passage from the Key of Solomon the King. Accursed be he who taketh the name of God in vain. Cursed be he who useth this knowledge unto an evil end. Be he accursed in this world and in the world to come. Amen. Be he accursed in the name which he hath blasphemed. Essential remarks upon the foregoing symbols. It is certain that among all the symbols which I have hereinbefore written down there be many which one can employ for evil purposes, and I avow that, at first, I intended not to give them here at all, but thereafter I did make reflection in myself that I was working no evil, for often the secret judgments of God permit disgrace, hindrances, infirmities, and other vexing accidents to happen unto mortals, either to awake them from the lethargy wherein they be sunk so that they recognize not their Creator, or else to give them an opportunity by their afflictions of increasing their merit. And although God can in no way do evil, but always good, Nevertheless we cannot deny that occasionally he permitteth the secondary causes to act. Now the executioners and executors of the divine justice be the evil spirits. Whence I conclude that although it may be in no sense advisable to work operations for evil, yet that there may arise, however, certain cases which do admit of and permit the same, as, for example, when it is necessary to save and defend one's own life, or to avert some great scandal or evil, or to prevent offensive acts which might be done against oneself, or to displease God and hurt one's neighbor, as well as in just wars, and the like cases. Yet it is always best in such instances to govern yourself according to the counsel of your holy guardian angel. I have also written these for the reason that God hath given unto man free will both in merit and demerit, for, further, having finished the operation, if thou shouldest wish, which I pray, 1. God not to permit, to operate for evil and to abuse the grace which God hath granted thee, the spirits would be only too ready to give and manifest unto thee the symbols, and will grant willingly unto thee all that thou shalt demand of them. Concerning this matter I repeat unto thee, fear the Lord, love him, and respect his commandments with a good heart, and thou shalt live happy and contented upon earth. If thou considerest maturely what be the essential points of this operation, thou shalt find that the first point is to make a firm, veritable, and real resolution to live in a truly edifying condition of modesty, and in retirement, as far as it shall be possible for thee so to do. For solitude is the source of many blessings, such as, to give oneself up to prayer, and unto the contemplation of things divine, to flee evil conversations and occasions of sin, to live in oneself, and to accustom oneself to continuing a life of such regularity. For if one were to go to present oneself before a king, what would one not do to appear before him with splendor and magnificence, and what diligence and care would not one? 1. In the original Quae Diem Neples, the parenthesis is put by Abraham the Jew. Put in practice to prepare oneself hereunto. Now we must understand that the enjoyment and vision of the angels of the Lord be infinitely above the princes of earth, who in fact are but a vanity, a shadow, and vile dust of earth. Now if to please these mortal princes one would almost commit idolatries, what ought one not to do to appear before the holy angels of God who represent the grandeur of the majesty of God? Let each one hold for a thing, sure and certain that the grace which the Lord granteth unto us in giving us this sacred science by the means and intermediation of his holy angels is so great that none can fitly express it. 'Tis certain that having obtained this sacred wisdom thou mayest dispose of it and communicate it unto 3 friends, but thou must not exceed this sacred number of the ternary, for in such case thou wouldest be altogether deprived of it. 1. Of the most meritorious deeds in the sight of the Lord, is to share with one's neighbor the goods which God hath given unto us, yet must we take note of that which God commanded unto Moses, when he ordered him to give the operation unto Aaron his brother, namely that he should receive as the symbol of an offering 10 golden florins, the which he should distribute unto 72 poor persons with his own hands, obliging them to repeat the psalms which I have already mentioned in the 2nd book, and which should be of the number of 72. For if he who receiveth this operation should not perform this alms, the operation would be void of value for him. Now, not yet having the authority to give it, without having received the 10 golden florins, thou must act like Moses, unto whom the Lord granted it on this condition, for him to give it unto his brother Aaron. I have also described the precautions which we must take before granting this sacred science unto any, and I repeat here that at least 6 months should transpire during which we should frequently test, and seek by conversations to sound, the inclinations of him unto whom we may be willing to give it, so as to know whether he be a reliable person, and also the object for which he deemeth and is anxious to obtain this science. Now shouldest thou perceive that such an one is light and inconstant, and that he hath only vague ideas, and habits and manners which be not good, then shalt thou temporize with him for a time, so as to bring up causes, occasions, or pretexts, so as not to give it unto him, even shouldest thou already have promised it to him. For it is better to undergo the displeasure of a mortal man than that of an eternal God, from whom thou hast received so great a grace. I have, however, myself made trial hereof, for to my great wonderment, once upon a time, when I was thinking that I was putting it to good use in giving it unto a certain person for whom I had great respect, God himself intervened and did not permit my intention to be carried out, for that person began of his own accord to wonder whether the matter were true or no, and he doubted it much, believing that it was a fable, and did not have an entire faith therein, and he made me comprehend by his discourse that he was not such an one as I had thought. Furthermore it happened that he fell dangerously ill, and I in my turn was reprimanded by my angel, who blamed me for the choice I had made. The whole machinery of the universe is maintained by faith, and he who believeth not, suffereth the chastisement of his perfidy both in this world and in the next. I could here say much more relating to our own selves, but as thou wilt have to pass under the 2 of thy holy guardian angel, thou wilt be sufficiently instructed in influence his own good time, and by himself, concerning these matters which be both 3 delicate and to be jealously guarded. The evil spirit is so subtle, so keen, and so cunning, that which he cannot obtain at the time of the conjuration, he will seek to have on other occasions in offering thee his services. This is why the very first action to take, especially with thy familiar spirits, should be to command them, never to say anything unto thee of themselves, but only to speak when thou shalt interrogate them, unless it were to warn thee of matters which concern either thine advantage or thine hurt. For if thou dost not limit their liberty of speech, they will tell thee so many and so important things, that they will completely over 4 thine understanding, and thou wilt not know what to believe, so that in cloud the confusion of ideas they could make thee prevaricate, and perhaps fall into irretrievable error. Never make thyself to be greatly entreated in any matter wherein thou canst aid and succor thy neighbor, and do not wait until he demandeth assistance from thee, but seek to know to the full his need even though it be concealed, and give him prompt aid. Also trouble not thyself as to whether he be Turk, pagan, or idolater, but do good unto all those who believe in a God. Be especially charitable towards those who are in extreme want, pre-wanners, or sick, and let thine heart be touched, and succor them generously, for God taketh pleasure in beholding the poor succored. In the 28th chapter, where it is treated of the way to have silver and gold sufficient to supply one's needs on occasion, thou must know that 2. In the original Passepar les mains de equals pass through the hands of, but this translation would sound somewhat undignified. In the original qui sont jaloux et délicats. 3. 4. In the original quils t'offusqueront l'entendement, literally, they will obfuscate thine understanding. The quantity of gold or of silver of which thou hast then actually need, will be at once brought unto thee, and thou canst use it for this occasion only. And if thou usest it not within the 24 hours, this sum will disappear, and thou wilt no longer be able to avail thyself of it. Think not, however, that this gold is but a fantasy, for if thou effectually expendest it, and dost not endeavour to hoard the same, he who shall receive it from thine hands can enjoy the same and expend it according unto his desire, and the money will be real both for him and for others. For once only mayest thou demand of thine holy angel the amount of gold and of silver which thou shalt judge suitable unto thine estate and conditions. My possessions were few, and I demanded of mine angel 3 thou 5, and they were granted unto me. Later I made 1,000 golden florins. Such good use of the sacred science, and I understood so well how to augment my goods, that at the present time, after having married 3 daughters unto each of whom I gave 100,000 golden florins, as thou wilt see by the testament which I have made, I am leaving in current money more than 1,000,000 golden florins, besides a large quantity of very valuable furniture. Had I been of noble birth, I might have demanded much more and have profited less. When anyone demanded of me, how have you managed to gain so much? I would reply thereto that it is a fine thing to know by certain knowledge how much such or such a thing is worth here, and how much it is worth elsewhere, that this year, wheat, barley, and other crops, will be cheap in Italy, and dear in France, etc., etc., and that commerce well managed, enricheth any one. As for what concerneth the manner of treating and commanding the spur, it is an easy thing unto whomsoever walketh by the proper paths, and it is a very difficult thing for whomsoever through ignorance submitteth himself unto them. I have heard say that there be some men who pass for being famous herein, such as a certain blind man Dakali, a certain Beerley, a Peter. 6. And many others. How many of them do but deceive them? Urbano. Selves. I do not say that these men did not perform extraordinary things, but it is necessary to note their manner of working, for their science is imperfect, and their authority proceedeth not from God by the intermediation of his holy 7. And angels, but proceedeth directly from expressed pacts made with the devil. Active, by means of consecrated books full of thousands of diabolical conjure. 5. In the original, Mil Florens Door. 6. Peter of Urbano or Epona is always considered to have been a great and powerful magician. Rations and impious exorcisms, in one word things which be contrary unto the commandments of God and the peace of men. And with all this their operations be destined for certain times and hours, and finally the demon carrieth away with him their miserable souls, which thing arriveth only too often. And yet it is the science of these persons which causeth them to pass for famous wise men. In the first book I have made mention of those whom I had encountered in my journeyings in Europe. The true commandment is that which dependeth from God, and in which there is no dependence placed on any spirit imaginable, for in employing them, if you make unto them the least submission, the slightest prayer, or honor, you are rendering yourselves their slaves, and they are in no way submitted unto you. The spirits have so great knowledge that they comprehend very well by our actions what dispositions we have, and understand our inclinations, so that from the very beginning they prepare the way to make us to fail. If they know that a man is inclined unto vanity and pride, they will humiliate themselves before him, and push that humility unto excess, and even unto idolatry, and this man will glory herein and become intoxicated with conceit, and the matter will not end without his commanding them some pernicious thing of such a nature that ultimately thence from will be derived that sin which will make the man the slave of the demon. Another man will be easily accessible to avarice, and then if he take not heed the malignant spirits will propose unto him thousands of ways of accumulating wealth, and of rendering himself rich by indirect and unjust ways and means, whence total restitution is afterwards difficult and even impossible, so that he who is in such case findeth himself ever the slave of the spirits. Another will be a man of letters, the spirits will inspire him with presumption, and he will then believe himself to be wiser even than the prophets. Furthermore they will endeavor to lead him astray in subtle points in matters appertaining unto God, and will make that man fall into 1,000 errors, the which afterwards when he wisheth to support he will very frequently deny God, and his high mysteries. The causes and matters whereof the spirits will make use to cause a man to waver are infinite, especially when the man attempteth to make them submit to his commands, and this is why it is most necessary to be upon one's guard and to distrust oneself. The true commandment will be that which will be given when he who commandeth shall have maturely reflected and considered who he is in himself, and who he is who should serve and obey him. And if a mortal 7. I cannot possibly see that the well-known heptameron or magical elements of Peter of Urbano in any way counsels pacts, or deserves the above severe speeches of Abraham the Jew. Man not having on his side the support of the power and will of the Lord shall have sufficient force to command the spirits and to constrain them to obey him. They, namely, who have the same virtue and power, which God hath granted unto them, they having lost nothing hereof, and they also being spirits from God and herein differing from thee who art drawn from the mire, as gold is from lead, and that their sin is notorious, for the which they were chased from heaven, figure also unto thyself, that a spirit which of his own nature is all vanity, would not be likely to submit himself unto thee without a superior 8. Force, compelling him, neither would he wish to obey thee nor to serve thee. He who shall reflect and reason upon these particulars will know that all things come unto us from God, and that it is he who wisheth and commandeth that the evil spirits should be submitted unto us. If then all things depend from the Lord, upon whom wilt thou, man, base thyself so as to be capable of thyself alone to dominate the spirits? It is certain that such an enterprise cannot succeed without the loss of thine own soul. Then it is by the virtue of that God who hath submitted them under thy feet, that thou shalt command them, as will be precisely ordained unto thee by thy holy angel. Donic ponam inimicus tuos scabellum padum torum. until I shall make thy foes thy footstool. Also do not familiarize thyself with them, for they be not little pet dogs. Adopt a serious tone and an air of authority, make them obey thee, and be well ware of accepting the least offer which they shall make unto thee of themselves, and treat them as their master. Also without occasion thou shalt never molest them, and order them to execute thy commands from point to point without adding or diminishing in any way imaginable. And when thou canst employ inferior spirits in a matter, thou shalt in no way make thy requests unto the superiors. Also, seeing that all have not the same powers, thou shalt take heed not to command unto one spirit a thing appertaining unto the office of another, and because it would be impossible for me to here write down in full the quality, virtue, and office of each spirit, thou shouldest search this out for thyself and sharpen thy faculties, and in the first demand which thou shalt make unto the 4 spirits, who are the supreme princes, and unto the 8 sub-princes, thou shalt demand the most skillful of the spirits, of whom thou shalt make a register for convenience of the practice which I describe unto thee in this 3rd book, where also thou wilt find the symbols of many spirits, seeing that the subjects of various erring humours of mind, and other occasions which arise daily be diverse, each man will procure for himself those spirits which be of it. This whole sentence is most confusedly worded in the original, and I have endeavoured to render it as literally as circumstances would allow. His nature and genius and fit for that wherein thou wouldest employ them. And when thou shalt find an extreme resistance unto operating, on the part of any spirit, after that thou shalt have given him the necessary instructions, and that he cannot execute that which thou hast commanded him, in such case thou shalt convoke the superior spirits and demand of them others which may be better capable of serving thee in thy need. And in all cases thou shalt avail thyself of the power and command of thy holy angel. Keep ever continually before thine eyes the fear of God, and seek to obey his commandments, and those of thy holy angel. Ever retain in thine heart his holy instructions. Never submit thyself unto the evil spirits in the slightest degree, even should it seem to be to thine own advantage and unto that of thy neighbor, so to do. For the rest, be certain that they will obey thee so perfectly and really, that there will be no operation, however great or difficult it may be, that thou shalt not bring unto a glorious termination, the which I myself also have done. As regardeth the service which thou shouldest render unto thy neighbor in his necessities, thou shouldest perform it with zeal, and in no sense wait for him to ask it of thee, and seek also to comprehend his needs unto the uttermost, so as to be able to take sound action therein. Thou shalt take heed to succor the infirm and the sick, and to work for their healing, and see that thou dost not good works to attract praises and to make thyself talked of in the world. Also thou mayest make semblance of performing thy cures, by prayers, or by ordinary remedies, or by the recital of some psalm, or by other like means. Thou shouldest be especially circumspect not to discover the like matters unto reigning princes, and in this particular thou shalt do nothing without consulting thy good angel, for there is a certain generation which is never contented, and besides that which ariseth from simple curiosity, these princes regard such action as a duty and obligation. Also it is a certain fact that he who possesseth this sacred magic hath no need whatever of them. Further, they are naturally inclined to ask of thee always things prejudicial, the which if granted by thee would offend the Lord, and if not they become your declared enemies. Now my opinion is that it would be always preferable to render them what services you can from a distance. There is nothing which is so pleasing unto the angels as to demand knowledge from them. And for my part I think there is no greater pleasure than that of becoming wise when one learneth from such masters. 249. I both have exhorted, and do exhort unto a solitary life, which is the source of all good. It is true that it is difficult to accustom oneself thereunto, but once thou shalt have obtained the sacred science and magic, the love for retirement will come unto thee of thine own accord, and thou wilt voluntarily shun the commerce with and conversation of men. For the pleasure and contentment thou wilt enjoy when thou shalt be the possessor of this science will be so great that thou wilt despise all amusements, excursions, riches, and every other thing however attractive. Such may be. For once only will it be permissible to obtain property and goods proportionate unto thy degree and estate, the which afterwards are to be used by spending them liberally for thine own needs and those of thy neighbor, sharing with him in his necessity the good things which God shall have given unto thee. For he who should employ these for evil ends shall render himself incapable of obtaining from God any other grace and benefit. The child which one should choose for greater surety and success in the acquisition of this sacred science should be born of a legitimate marriage, and its father and mother should be also legitimate. It should be from 6 to 7 years of age, vivacious and witty. It should have a clear speech and pronounce well. Thou shalt prepare it some time before commencing the operation, and have it ready when the time requireth. I myself am of opinion that there should be 2 children, in case of any accident which might happen, through sickness, or death, or other like hindrance. Thou shalt gain it over to thee by giving it puerile things to amuse it, and have it ready when necessary, but in no way tell it anything of what it is to serve for, so that if it be questioned by its parents it can tell them nothing. And if it be a well-behaved child, it is all the better. We may be certain that by this means we can arrive at the possession of the sacred science, for where he who operateth faileth, the innocence of the child supplieth that which is wanting, and the holy angels are much pleased. 10. With its purity, we should not admit women into this operation. All the clothes and other things which have been used during the period of the 6 moons, you should preserve, if you intend to continue in the same house wherein thou hast performed the operation, because they be always good. But if thou dost not intend to use them more, nor yet the oratory, thou shalt burn them all, and bury the ashes in a secret place. 9. Yet apparently Abraham himself led anything but a retired life, being mixed up in most of the leading political events of his time. 10. Abraham here means apparently not to use a woman in place of the child. It is now necessary to give unto thee a little light, and declare unto thee the quality and value of the spirits, and in what thou canst exactly employ them with surety of success. Thou must however take note that each spirit hath a great quantity of inferior spirits which be submitted unto him. Also I wish to say that as regardeth things base, vile, and of little importance, the superior spirit will not execute them, but will cause them to be executed by his inferiors with all punctuality. And this mattereth not unto him who operateth, provided that his commands be fulfilled, and that he be punctually obeyed. The order of the first hierarchy. 11. Seraphim, cherubim, thrones. The spirits of the seraphim serve to make thee respected and loved for works of charity, for that which regardeth honors and other similar things. In matters of great importance they themselves act, but for matters base and carnal, it is their subjects who do serve and operate. The order of the second hierarchy. Dominions, virtues, and powers. The property of the dominions is to dominate, to procure liberty, to vanquish enemies, to give authority over princes, and over all kinds of persons, even ecclesiastics. The virtues are proper to give strength and force in all matters, whether of war or peace, and in all operations concerning the health of men, and in all maladies for which the fatal hour hath not yet been written. The powers have the dominion over all the inferior spirits, and this is why they can serve in all things in general, good or evil, and they are devoted unto all things in general, good or evil, and they be straight and right in execution, very punctual, very prompt, and exact in their operations. The order of the third hierarchy. Princes, archangels, and angels. The princes comprise spirits capable of giving treasures and riches, and they or their dependents serve in all the operations, being a mass composed of different orders, and they are sufficiently truthful. 11. These and the following titles of the hierarchies are usually ascribed to the good angels, but sometimes are also employed to designate grades of the evil and fallen angels as well. The archangels be proper to reveal all occult matters, and all kinds of secret things, such as obscure points in theology and the law. They serve with great diligence. The angels in general do operate each one according unto his quality. There be an infinite number of them. They command the 4 princes and the 12, having taken their 8 sub-princes in all kinds of operations. These latter, both, observe that which they have promised, provided that the operation one demandeth of them be in their power. To cause the spirit to re-enter a dead body is a very great and difficult 13. Operation, because in order to accomplish it the 4 sovereign princes have to operate. Also it is necessary to take great care, and to pay heed unto this warning, namely that we should not commence this operation until the sick person is really at the point of death, so that his life is absolutely despaired of. It should be so timed as to take place a little while before the sick person giveth up the ghost, and thou shalt carry out all that we have said hereon in the second book. But on no account should we perform this operation to divert ourselves, nor for every class of person, but only on occasions of the very utmost and most absolute necessity. This operation I myself have performed but twice in my life, namely once for the Duke of Saxonia, and on another occasion in the case of a lady whom the Emperor Sigismund loved passionately. The familiar spirits are very prompt, and they are able to execute in most minute detail all matters of a mechanical nature, with the which therefore it is well to occupy them, as in historical painting, in making statues, clocks, weapons, and other like matters, also in chemistry, and in causing them to carry out commercial and business transactions under the form of other persons, in making them transport merchandise and other goods from one place to another, also to employ them in causing quarrels, fights, homicides, and all kinds of evils, and malefic acts. Also to convey letters and messages of all kinds from one country to another, to deliver prisoners, and in 1,000 other ways which I have frequently experimented. These spirits should be treated according to their quality, and a distinction should be made between a great spirit and one of a vile or insignificant nature, but thou shouldest nevertheless always conserve over them that domination which is proper unto him who operateth. In speaking unto them thou shalt give them no title, but shalt address them sometimes as you, sometimes as 12, meaning apparently the 4 princes and 8 sub-princes of the demons, before so often alluded to. 13. Viz. Lucifer, Leviathan, Satan, and Belial. And thou shalt never seek out expressions to please them, and thou shalt 14. Always have with them a proud and imperious air. There be certain little terrestrial spirits that are simply detestable, sorcerers and necromantic magicians generally avail themselves of their services, for they operate only for evil, and in wicked and pernicious things, and they be of no use soever. He who operateth could, should he so wish, have 1,000,000 such, but the sacred science which worketh otherwise than necromancy in no way permitteth you to employ such as be not constrained by an oath to obey you. All that hath hitherto been said and laid down should suffice, and it is in no wise to be doubted that he who executeth all these matters from point to point, and who shall have the right intention to use this sacred science unto the honor and glory of God Almighty for his own good, and for that of his neighbor, shall arrive with ease at the possession thereof, and even matters the most difficult shall appear easy unto him. But human nature is so depraved and corrupted, and so different from that which the Lord hath created, that few persons, if any, do walk in the right way, and it is so easy to prevaricate, and so difficult not to fail in an operation which demandeth the whole soul of a man in its entirety. And, in order not to intimidate in any way him who shall resolve to undertake this operation, I am about here to set down in writing the difficulties, temptations, and hindrances which will be caused him by his own relatives, and all this will be occasioned by the evil spirits so as to avoid having to submit themselves, and humiliate themselves, and subject themselves unto man, their greatest enemy, seeing that they behold him in powerful condition arriving at the enjoyment of that eternal glory which they themselves have foolishly lost, and their rage is so great and their grief so poignant, that there is in the world no evil which they be not ready to work, if God were to permit them, they being always attracted by the idea of the destruction of the human race. Therefore is it necessary to take courage and make a constant resolution to resist in all things with intrepidity, and to earnestly desire to obtain from God so great a grace in despite of men and of the demon. Also beforehand thou shouldest arrange thine affairs in such wise that they can in no way hinder thee, nor bring thee any disquietude in the period of the 6 moons, during which time there will occur the greatest possible attempts at assault and damage unto thee which the keen and subtle enemy will bring to bear upon thee. He will cause thee to come in contact with evil books, and wicked persons, who by diabolic methods and tricks will seek to turn thee aside from this enterprise. 14. In spite of what Abraham here says, I must reiterate, that the greatest courtesy should always be used towards spirits, otherwise the operator will speedily be led into error, even though it be already commenced, by bringing before thee matters which in appearance will seem of the greatest importance, but which really be only built up on false and evil foundations. To such annoying accidents thou shouldest steadily oppose thyself, by following out carefully the ample instructions which I have given thee, thus banishing them from thee with calmness and tranquillity, so as to give no chance to the enemy of exercising his fraudulent tricks to interrupt thee. Thy relations also, astonished at thy manner of life and thy retirement, will make every effort to attempt to find out the reasons thereof. It will be necessary to satisfy them by words full of affection, and to make them think that time which engendereth change also causeth men who are not altogether ignorant persons to resolve at times to live by themselves. This bath been the cause why so great a number of good and learned men have retired into desert places, so that being separated from their own relatives and from the world they might live tranquilly in prayer and orisons to render themselves more worthy to obtain through the grace of the Lord a gift so great and so perfect. I further approve of thy possessing a Bible in the vulgar language, and also the Psalms of David, for thine own use. Some person may here reply, I understand the Latin, and I have no need of the common language. I answer him that when we pray we ought not in any way to embarrass the mind by having to interpret the Psalms, for at such a moment we should be as much united as possible to God, and even the Psalms being in the vulgar tongue, when one readeth them, they imprint themselves better on the memory, and this is the true manner of particular prayer, if the person praying be illiterate, for in saying the Psalms in Latin he would not know what he was asking of God. In these 3 books we shall not find the slightest thing which hath not a true and necessary foundation, and we should take the greatest care, and keep ourselves as we would from a deadly poison, from commencing this operation at all, if we have not made a firm resolution to carry it through unto the end. Because, in the contrary case, some notable evil would befall him who had, carelessly, commenced the operation, and who would then only too well comprehend that we may not make a mock of the Lord. Let it happen that God by his will and commandment should visit thee and afflict thee with some malady which should render thee incapable of finishing the operation according unto thy wish, thou having already commenced it, then shouldest thou like an obedient servant submit thyself humbly unto his holy will and commandment, reserving his grace unto the time pleasing unto his divine majesty to grant it thee. And thou shalt cease from thine operation, so as to finish it on another more favorable occasion, and meanwhile thou shalt devote thyself unto the cure of thy body. And such a case ought in no way to afflict thee, for the secrets of God are impenetrable, and he performeth, permitteth, and operateth all things for the best and for our good, although it may be not understanded of us. Hereinafter will I set down the key of this operation, which is the only thing which facilitateth this operation to enjoy the vision of the holy angels. 15. Given hereafter upon the brow of the child and of, by placing the symbols, him who performeth the operation, as I have said in the first book, to which one can easily refer. I will say even as much as this, that out of 100 scarcely 5 or 6 persons can attain unto the possession of this sacred magic without this key, for reasons which one can in no way disclose. Also we should repeat the Psalm Vi Domine, ni in furori tuo arguas me, etc. O Lord, afflict me not in thine anger. There is nothing in the world which we should so much desire as a true science, neither is there any more difficult to obtain than this one, because often one dieth before attaining unto it in its entirety. This is the true and only way of this sacred science and magic which the Lord hath granted unto us by his pure mercy, and is that which in 6 months maketh us attain unto the most high and occult gifts of the Lord which we can think of. This is the true science which comprehendeth all other sciences once one is in possession thereof. Oh, how many books be read among us which seem wonderful! It is not fitting for me even to reveal a part of this science and its proper ties, and to appropriate unto myself that which appertaineth unto a person of a 16. In teaching it even, I have far exceeded that great mind and so far above me, which I should have done, in having given unto thee the 2 last symbols. But what will not paternal love and affection do? Endeavor only to obey me and to follow out my precepts from point to point, according to the manner in which I have given them unto thee in writing, keeping alway the fear of God before. 15. See the squares with the names of Adam and Uriel given at the end of the work. 16. This whole passage is awkwardly and obscurely worded in the French. By the person of great mind, I suppose that Abraham intends to designate Abramelin. Thine eyes also forget not the slightest thing which I have said unto thee in these 3 books, for with the help of God who ruleth and governeth all things, and reigneth gloriously in heaven and upon earth, and whose divine justice shineth in hell, if thou hast recourse unto him, and puttest all thy confidence in his divine mercy, thou shalt obtain this holy science and magic whose power is inexpressible. Then, my son, and whosoever may attain thereunto, remember to praise and glorify the Lord, and to pray unto him that he may be willing to deign and accord unto me his holy glory, the place of veritable rest, whereof to me while yet in this valley of misery he hath granted a large share through his goodness and mercy, and I pray the Lord also that he may be willing to grant it unto thee also with his holy benediction, and unto all those who by thy means will arrive at the possession of this sacred magic, and who will use it according to his holy will. May God deign, say I, to grant unto such all temporal goods, and a good death in his holy kingdom. So may it be. And note, the above set of 4 squares evidently represent the symbols already referred to in the 2nd book, chap. 20. And in the concluding pages of this 3rd book, as being those to be placed on the head of the operator and of the child during the angelic invocation. The name Uriel for the former, the name Adam for the latter. But evidently, also, the squares of numbers above are intended as the reverse sides of the 2 lower ones. The Latin word homo is the translation of Adam in the sense of man. The squares of numbers are not of the ordinary magical class,